Welcome to Replay.
It's the way we socialize with our friends or use up our free time. But what a lot of us don't realize is the process it takes to bring film to the silver screen. Which is what brings me to my question of the day is, should national governments have the right to censor film? Now, on one hand, there's the fear of restriction, that giving governments this power will prevent from filmmakers to be able to use their freedom of expression to create their art, and that viewers can't use their own judgment to decide what they think is right for them to watch. But on the other hand, giving governments this power averts from offending certain groups or people, and it prevents from viewers being influenced by harmful ideologies. By evaluating these different perspectives, we'll be able to find whether or not a government should have this power. Now, first off, what is film censorship? Well, the Hutchinson Unabridged Encyclopedia of Atlas and Weather Guide defines it as, quote, control of content and presentation of films. And film itself is defined by the Dictionary of Visual Discourse, a dialectical lexicon of terms, as, quote, television and today video and digital imaging. Now, of course, this still leaves with us a wide range for us to analyze when it comes to film censorship. So I tried to narrow down my research to mostly feature-length live-action films and the precursors to those as films being developed. Though, of course, other kinds of films will be mentioned throughout my presentation. In my research, I found that there were four main variables that affected this topic: whether or not censorship can be controlled, its effect on political power, its effect on global image, and the potential spread of harmful ideologies through film. We'll start with whether or not censorship can be controlled. Martin Barker, who is an emeritus professor at Aberystwyth University, said that censorship that is moral in its existence blocks immoral concepts from the audience, and that the audience is the one who decides what is moral and immoral. He supports this by bringing up the British Board of Film Classification, in which the board would censor and ban films, however, it used analytical language to explain why it was censoring and banning films. It was educating itself in why certain concepts were being used in film, rather than just using this power to push certain government ideologies onto the audience. Morals also continuously change. David Badiel, who's a comedian and TV presenter, said that censorship can actually mean glamorization. And this is supported in an article by Robert Peck, where he analyzes the 1943 German film, Titanic. This film was banned for several years in Germany due to some of its political ideologies, and as soon as it was unbanned, all the advertising surrounded it focused on the fact that it was a banned film. This poster even calls it the 1943 banned German epic. Peck says that with all this focus on how it was banned, it was probably why it became as famous as it is today to art critics and historians. The idea that morals continuously change is also supported by Robert Boutini's 1960s master's thesis, in which he says that morals are going to change too quickly. He cites how the Motion Production Picture Code, which is the set of regulations used in the United States for film, had to be rewritten 4 times in the first 30 years of its existence. Boutini says that societal standards are going to change too quickly for there to ever be one set of regulations. And keep in mind, this was before the internet. With the internet, ideas and morality can spread and change even quicker. The idea of the internet actually plays a huge role when it comes to film censorship. Daniel Hicken said that web browsers are available for free online. And if a person owns film, they can then place it online, and anyone who has access to an internet service provider can then watch it, even if it's banned in that country. The addition of Amazon has also completely changed the game. It's a similar idea. If a film is censored or banned in your country, you can order it off of Amazon and have it arrive on your doorstep completely uncensored, where it may be illegal to watch in that form in your country. However, Brenda Kaufman argues the other way, that the internet can actually lead to more censorship. Kaufman says that websites are owned privately, and that if a person has a website, they can then censor however they please, without one governing body to set those regulations in terms of censorship. Censorship can then become radical. Our final part is legislation, in which Derek Dalton and Catherine Schubert take a look at when they analyzed Australian legislature. In their research, they found that the legislator attempted to disclude the word censorship or ban in hopes of disguising to their audience that they didn't have this power. However, it ended up being a poor tactic as news was spread as soon as the film was censored or banned. This was seen with the movies Bates Moor and Hen Park. These movies were banned in Australia due to strong graphic violence and sexual content. However, as soon as it was made public that these films were censored or banned, it resulted in a large backlash from the public, and the Australian government had to go back on their previous banning and instead send it to the highest restriction so some people could still watch it. This was not seen with a similar film of Nine Songs. Nine Songs also had strong graphic violence and sexual content. However, despite the fact that it was banned, the audience didn't come back with the same sort of backlash. And the reason for this is where these films were banned. Bates Moor and Hen Park were banned in Commonwealth Australia, while Nine Songs was banned in South Australia. The difference between these two areas is that in Commonwealth Australia, it's made much more public when a film is banned than it is in South Australia. So it may not necessarily be legislation that helps a government control censorship, but rather the control of ideas that does. Now, as there's going to be control over media like film, there's going to be an effect on the political power of the government that's doing so. This was seen during the Franco regime in Spain, according to Patin Miguel. This was about from the 1930s to the 1980s, where Spain was incredibly Catholic and wanted its people to reflect as such. One ways they would do this is through film, and they would control women through this way. In these films, there would always be two types of women, the good woman and the bad woman. The good woman was quiet, polite, religious, and would stay by her husband no matter what, including cheating or leaving the marriage. Meanwhile, the bad woman was loud and non-religious. She was often sexualized and the reason as to why a man would leave the marriage. These two women would always have the same endings in these films. The good woman would have her happily ever after and her husband would come back to her, and the bad woman would have an untimely fate or become a social outcast. With this idea drilled into Spaniard women's heads over and over again that for them to have their own happily ever after, they'd have to act like the good women, they began to be influenced by it. In this way, Spain was controlling their mindsets in almost a sort of brainwashing. According to Censor Park in the 1990s, South Korea didn't want there to be any negative perceptions of the political powers. This led to an inaccurate world perception for South Koreans, as they could see no faults in their government. It also led to a loss to the right of knowledge, because South Koreans couldn't fairly compare their government to others around the world. At the same time, this could lead to an increase in national pride. If you were surrounded by propaganda telling you that your country and its people and the government was the best, surely you'd begin to believe it, and then you and your fellow countrymen could begin to bond over it. However, it ended up being a poor tactic for South Korea due to the way that they would censor films. When a film was completed, it would be sent to the South Korean censoring board, and then any parts that the board didn't agree with would then be cut out, and without any other influence, released that way. This resulted in films becoming, quote, disjointed and incomplete, end quote. Overall, it led to a loss in the box office, filmmakers would lose their jobs, and the audience may not enjoy a film because major plot points could be cut out of the film. Overall, it became an unhappy lifestyle for South Koreans. A very similar occurrence was in China, according to Tian Hai-zi, where in 1976, the Communist Party relinquished control of China. And the government still wanted the country to appear favorable, so there were no negative perceptions of the government allowed in Chinese film. However, the control was so strict that there were no private film companies allowed in China, which means all film during this time was created by the government. Tian Hai-zi emphasizes how film censorship became a large role when there were no other supporters for the Chinese people, because the government was the only one releasing new ideas into the industry. Now, past three examples have all been qualitative evidence. They've all been attempts by governments to try and control their citizens. However, Michelle Potts, who's an associate professor at Dayton University, gives us quantitative evidence by analyzing the films Argo and Zero Dark Thirty. Argo is based on a government worker involved in the Iranian hostage crisis in 1980, while Zero Dark 30 is based on the search for bin Laden. Obviously, both of these films are very politically based. So how Potts' study would work is when a participant would fill out a form with their political leanings, watch one of these films of their choice, and then fill out another form to see if their political leanings had changed. The result of this was that a quarter of participants had changed political leanings. Now, this may seem insignificant, however, Potts writes, quote, "Consider that watching one film resulted in changes of viewers' opinions. Imagine how several films might affect opinions." We still need to keep in mind, however, that Potts' study only included 69 participants, And in order for us to deem it as credible, we'd have to repeat her experiment several times over. Now, as there's an effect on political power, there's also an effect on global images for individuals and organizations around the world. Specifically culture, according to Camille Deprez, in terms of India. After the British relinquished control over India, Indians wanted there to be a new sort of culture for themselves in order to separate themselves from the British. And one of the people who would try to do that is filmmakers. Filmmakers would try and portray Indians in a certain way in hopes of influencing the population, and hopefully they would begin to act in this new way rather than how they did under the British rule. This was especially effective because a large portion of the population in India is illiterate. This emphasizes how developing nations who also have more controlling totalitarian governments are also more likely to be affected by film, since it's one of the few ways they can use their free time without the ability to read. There's also the issue of defamation. During the 1920s, according to Laureate, Mexicans and Mexican Americans were having an issue with Hollywood due to the way they would portray Mexicans. And that would be the stereotype of greasers. Greasers were a dirty, poor, and unintelligent version of Mexicans, and it was the only way that Hollywood would portray them. This created a rift between Mexico and Hollywood because Hollywood was refusing to portray them in a different way or stop the trade of this. In fact, it was so serious to Mexicans that they were able to get their government involved and enforce a strict border control to stop the flow of these movies into Mexico in hopes of emphasizing to Hollywood how important this issue was to them. And this leads me to discrimination. During the 20th century, there was an African-American legislator in Illinois whose name was Robert R. Jackson. Jackson would sponsor laws in hopes to racially progress the United States at this time. One of these was to prevent any race from being portrayed as criminals. However, despite the fact that he was able to get the law passed, it was often not enforced. This may be, once again, because legislation isn't very effective in terms of film censorship. However, it's more likely due to the racist undertones of the time period, where white legislators and police officers just did not care to help African Americans at this time. At the same time, Jackson's law appeared in front of the Supreme Court twice and won both times. So it can be assumed that his law probably did help racially progress the United States. In 2016, Daniel Ortner released an article in the controversial film, The Innocence of Muslims. This film was incredibly controversial because of its strong negative portrayal of Islam, which included blood, violence, and a strong degree of barbarity. It sparked protests around the Middle East, some even resulting in deaths. However, despite the strong backlash, Ortner argues that this film should not be censored or banned, because the point of the film wasn't to just insult Islam as a religion. The point of it was to entice intelligent conversation on the faults of the religion, and hopefully as a global community, solve these together. And this leads me to international relations. Nana Garcia Crespo covered the TV series The March of Time, which she calls a, quote, fiction newsreel hybrid, end quote. However, it still attempted to appear as a legitimate documentary series. In one episode, the film implied that Rafael Trujillo, who was the Dominican leader of this time, only rose to power due to the U.S. Marines' occupation of the country and due to the murder of Angel Morales, who was a Dominican ambassador to the United States. The United States refused to stop the flow of this film, and it created rifts between the Dominican Republic and the United States. This is especially significant due to the Franklin D. Roosevelt's Good Neighbor policy, in which the United States was actually supposed to be improving relations with Latin America. Our final variable is going to be the spread of harmful influence through film. An important one is smoking. According to Anne-Marie Charlesworth and Stanton Glantz, in the research they found that Thai and Hong Kong teens were more likely to smoke the more US movies they watched, which include far more tobacco products than Thai and Hong Kong movies did. This suggests that influence is a global problem, and that teenagers around the world can be influenced to a similar degree. So using this, Stanton Glantz and Anne-Marie Charlesworth suggest a rating system, in which any movie that contains a tobacco product be put into an R rating. However, at the same time, their research found that tobacco was often not relevant to a scene and even rarely the focus. This means that the young audience then loses the opportunity to enjoy an otherwise appropriate film. There's also the worry of an increase in violence due to film. Joel Timmer analyzed the original Motion Production Picture Code, which is, again, the set of regulations used for the United States for film, and he analyzed the effectiveness of those original restrictions. In it, he found that specific violence and aggressive acts, like repeated criminality, did negatively affect viewers. He also found that similar demographics were more likely to affect viewers. If you were to see a person like yourself commit an immoral action, you were also more likely to commit that immoral action. This implies that censorship can target certain viewers and how important it is power like this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. It's also well known how influential adolescents are. John Kennedy Taylor said that there have been continuous proposals of censorship and hopes to protect adolescents. One of these being the Children's Protection from Violent Programming Act, proposed by Senator Rawlings in 1997. In it, it described that violent programming should only be viewable to children that were, at times that children were unlikely to view them. However, it did not count, quote, newscasts and sporting events, nor pay-per-view cable programming, end quote. This means that there's a larger risk for some children, including those who are families that like to keep up on current events and like to have the news on, which would still include cable programming, or those in families who like to pay more to the TV industry in hopes of getting that violent cable programming. However, Taylor says that legislation has often been weak in the past. Governments have also been unable to define exactly what obscenity or indecency means. And the public will be able to continuously find holes in censorship. However, it's more than just adolescents that can be affected by government. People older than adolescents can too. Kevin Rocket said that in Ireland, family was the focus when creating censorship legislation. There was a worry of quote-unquote imitative behavior to reflect on the entirety of Ireland. The government was seen to be concerned for more than just the adolescents, and in fact would go so far as to look at the 10 Commandments to try and see what was moral and immoral for the society to watch. This shows responsible use of censorship that governments have used in the past. And some have tried to solve the spread of harmful influence, one of these being Monica Mehta, who's an associate professor at Binghamton University. She mentioned a rating system used in India, where there are several different genres and ratings used, and a film must be approved by a board before they can be released in these categories. In this way, the government is still in control over film. However, a lot of the power is given back to the people, as they're given a lot of information back before they watch these films. This shows another potential responsible use of censorship by governments. However, this topic is nowhere near fully researched. We're just skimming the surface. We should still look at the effect of slanderous films, which are films that purposely try to negatively affect the reputation of individuals or groups. And we need to see how popular these films can become when they can be so negative. And we should also look at other ways we can prevent the measures of harmful influence.